The fork was on the wrong side of the plate. Not her face, not the stiffness in her shoulders, not the way she'd barely touched her pot roast. Just that small silver fork, resting on the left side of her dinner plate instead of the right. A detail nobody else in the room would have noticed. Nobody else at that table knew what it meant. But I knew. My name is Rex Aldridge. I'm 63 years old, and I live alone in a two-bedroom ranch house on the east side of Dayton, Ohio. I drive a 2014 Buick that needs new rear brake pads, and I mow my own lawn because I don't like strangers walking around my property. To anyone looking at me from the outside, I am exactly what I appear to be. A retired insurance adjuster who drinks too much coffee, watches too much baseball, and feeds the neighborhood squirrels against his better judgment. That is exactly the story I have always wanted the world to believe. My daughter Cora was 31 years old and a registered nurse at Miami Valley Hospital. She was brilliant, careful, and quiet in the way that people who grow up watching someone grieve tend to be quiet. Her mother died when Cora was 9. We raised each other after that in a lot of ways. She became methodical, precise. She double-checked everything: medication dosages, discharge instructions, whether the front door was locked before bed. I taught her that. I also taught her the fork signal. She was 16 when we created it. A girl in her friend group had been pressuring her into things she didn't want to do. Copying homework, covering for lies, small corruptions that pile up quietly until they define you. I told her one night over dinner, if you're ever sitting across from someone who's controlling the conversation and you can't speak freely, move your fork to the left side of your plate. I'll see it. I won't ask questions in front of anyone. I will get you out of the situation safely. She used it exactly once, at a school dinner where that same girl showed up drunk and belligerent. That was 15 years ago. Now it was Christmas Eve, and my daughter was sitting at my dining room table with her fork on the wrong side of her plate. Rowan Slade had been in my home for 2 hours. He arrived in a dark green Range Rover with a personalized license plate, which told me 2 things immediately. He spent money on things designed to be noticed, and he wanted me to notice them. He was 34, lean, handsome in a calculated way, with a firm handshake and the kind of eye contact that lasts slightly too long, the kind they teach at sales training seminars. He called me sir exactly the right number of times. My daughter introduced him as her boyfriend of 8 months. She'd mentioned him in phone calls over the fall. Careful, measured mentions, the way you mention something you're not entirely sure about yet. I'd asked once if things were serious. She paused before answering. That pause told me more than anything she said afterward. We were halfway through dinner. Pot roast, roasted potatoes, green beans I'd frozen from the garden in August. When Rowan started talking about the house, he did it subtly. Complimented the neighborhood first, the mature trees, the quiet street. Then mentioned that older homes like this had a lot of character, but also a lot of deferred maintenance. Then asked if I'd considered downsizing, given that it was just me rattling around in here. He laughed when he said it. Cora stared at her plate. I'm comfortable where I am, I said pleasantly, reaching for the salt. He nodded with the patient expression of a man humoring someone who doesn't quite understand his own situation. Of course. It just seems like a lot for one person. Have you looked at what properties in this zip code are going for? You're sitting on something significant, Rex. You could really free yourself up financially. Cora set her fork down, on the left side of the plate. I didn't freeze. I didn't look at her. I reached over and picked up the gravy boat and asked Rowan if he'd like more, and he smiled and said no thank you, and I kept my face exactly as it had been 30 seconds before. My heart was doing something else entirely. 28 years with IRS criminal investigation trained certain things into my body that don't go away. When you spend nearly 3 decades sitting across from people who are lying to federal investigators, corporate accountants, fraudulent billing coordinators, men in expensive suits who move money through shell companies like water through a sieve, your face becomes a separate instrument from your emotions. You learn to keep one still while the other does its work. I excused myself to get more dinner rolls from the kitchen. Standing at the counter with the oven light on, I slid my phone from my shirt pocket and opened an application that looks like a weather app. Blue icons. Nothing remarkable. It connected to 6 small cameras I installed in this house when I bought it 11 years ago. Old habit. My former supervisor used to say that paranoia and preparation are the same word wearing different clothes. I pulled up the feed for the upstairs hallway. Empty. Checked the guest bathroom. Empty. Scrolled to the study, a small room off the landing where I keep files, a desktop computer, and a locked metal cabinet. The cabinet isn't anything special to look at. Brown metal, combination lock, the kind you'd find in any home office. Rowan was standing in front of it. He was wearing nitrile gloves, blue disposable ones. He'd brought them with him. He bypassed the combination lock in under 40 seconds using a tool I recognized immediately, a bypass pick set, popular with locksmiths and people who have no legitimate business in other people's filing cabinets. He pulled open the upper drawer and removed a manila folder. Inside it were copies of my property tax statements, my homeowner's insurance policy, and the deed to this house. Decoys. Every document in that cabinet was a decoy. I'd built that filing system the first month I lived here, filling it with accurate but deliberately limited information, just enough to make someone feel like they'd found something real. He photographed every page. I walked back to the dining room with the dinner rolls and set them on the table and poured myself more water and asked Rowan whether he followed college football. We discussed the season for 4 minutes while I watched the camera feed on my phone beneath the edge of the table, hidden under my napkin. He came back downstairs 11 minutes after he'd gone up, said he'd had trouble finding the bathroom. Cora said nothing. After dinner, I made decaf. Rowan stood by the window, discussing interest rates and real estate comps in the casual tone of a man who discusses such things constantly and finds it tiring that not everyone keeps up. When Cora carried a stack of plates to the kitchen, I followed with the gravy boat. She stood at the sink, with her back to the doorway, and her hands were shaking. Without turning around, she placed a folded piece of notebook paper on the counter next to the dish soap. I picked it up and put it in my cardigan pocket and went back to the living room. Rowan left at 9:30. Same handshake, same duration, same pleasant firmness. He told me it had been a real pleasure and that he was looking forward to getting to know me better in the new year. Cora hugged me at the door for a long time. I told her to drive safe. She looked at me once, quickly, directly, and then looked away. I stood in the doorway and watched the Range Rover back down the driveway and disappear around the corner. Then I unfolded the note. Her handwriting was small and controlled, the way nurses write when they're charting under pressure. He has my NPI number, my DEA registration, and my nursing license number. He used them to register a fraudulent durable medical equipment company 4 months ago. $1.8 million in false Medicare claims. My signature is on the incorporation documents. He told me if I go to the authorities or try to leave him, he reports everything to the Ohio Medical Board and the OIG. I lose my license, criminal charges. I didn't know what he was doing, I swear to God, Dad. I didn't know. I stood in the kitchen under the overhead light for a long time. My daughter had spent 4 years in nursing school and 7 years building a career. She got up at 5 in the morning, 3 days a week. She worked 12-hour shifts. She'd sat with dying patients whose families couldn't get there in time. She'd sent me photos of thank you cards she kept in her locker. She had done nothing wrong, and this man had used her professional identity like a tool, a component in a machine, and then planted the threat like a landmine under her feet, timed to detonate the moment she tried to leave. I folded the note and put it in the locked drawer of my nightstand. Then I went down to the basement. Most of the basement looks like any basement. Water heater, storage shelves, holiday decorations in labeled bins. Behind the shelving unit on the north wall, secured with a keypad, is a door. I built it when I bought the house. My daughter thinks it's where I keep the lawn equipment. There is no lawn equipment in it. There are 2 monitors, a server rack, encrypted drives, and a secure line I have kept active for 11 years through a former colleague named Sutton Greer, who spent 31 years with IRS criminal investigation, and now consults for the HHS Office of Inspector General. I sat down at the terminal. Durable medical equipment fraud is one of the most common and most profitable Medicare fraud schemes in the country. A bad actor obtains legitimate healthcare provider credentials, typically by targeting someone in the medical field, registers a DME supply company, and begins billing Medicare for equipment that is never ordered, never delivered, sometimes doesn't exist. The healthcare professional whose credentials were stolen takes the legal exposure. Their license disappears. Their career ends. They rarely see it coming until the federal notice arrives in the mail. I ran Rowan Slade through 4 databases in the first 20 minutes. He didn't exist before 2018. The Social Security number, the Ohio driver's license, the credit history, all constructed in a concentrated window, the way a fabricated identity gets built when someone has access to the right documents and the right assistance. His real name took me another 40 minutes to locate, buried in a federal court filing from 2016, Middle District of Florida. A civil forfeiture action involving a home medical supply company and a licensed physical therapist in Tampa, whose credentials had been used to bill Medicare for $2.3 million in phantom orthotics. His name wasn't Rowan Slade, it was Fen Carey. The Florida case had been resolved through civil settlement. He paid back a fraction of what he owed, surrendered the company, and walked out. No criminal conviction, no registry. Nothing that surfaces in a routine background check run by a person who trusts the man they love. The therapist in Tampa lost her license anyway. He had done it before Cora. I found 2 other victims, a physician's assistant in Louisville, a pharmacist in Columbus, Ohio. Different aliases each time, different women, same method, healthcare credential, intimate relationship, fraudulent billing. Exit before the federal investigation concludes. Leave the professional buried under a debt they didn't create. My phone rang at 11:47. I answered with a soft tremor in my voice, the kind of vocal quality that develops in older men when they're frightened, and that I have been able to produce on demand for 3 decades in interview rooms. Rex, no sir this time. I hope I'm not calling too late. No, I said, slow and uncertain sounding. I was just getting ready for bed. Is something wrong? Is she all right? She's fine, he said. She's asleep. I wanted to speak with you privately. A brief pause. I want you to understand something about your daughter's situation. He walked me through it with the clean efficiency of someone who has done it before. The company, the Medicare claims, her credentials, the federal exposure. He used terms like regulatory investigation and mandatory reporting, the way someone uses vocabulary they've researched carefully, fluent but not native. He told me the problem could disappear quietly, that her career, her reputation, her entire professional life could remain intact, but that required a gesture of cooperation from me. What kind of gesture? I asked. The house, he said, and the property. You sign a quitclaim deed, voluntary transfer, my LLC takes the title, and everything gets handled discreetly. She never has to know what it cost you. I let the silence stretch. She's all I have, I said finally. I know that, he said warmly. That's why I'm giving you this opportunity. I told him I understood, that I would cooperate, that I just needed to know she'd be protected. You have my word, he said. I thanked him. Then I sat in the dark basement for a while, listening to the server fans. I called Sutton Greer at 12:15. He picked up in 2 rings, which told me he still keeps his phone on the nightstand. I gave him everything, the real name, the Florida civil case, the 2 prior victims I'd identified, the current scheme using Cora's credentials, the company registration details, the extortion call I'd recorded on a secondary device during the conversation. Sutton was quiet for a moment. Then I heard his chair creak. DME Mill, he said. Full package, I confirmed. Give me until morning. By 6 the next morning, Sutton had an OIG case agent, a federal prosecutor from the Southern District of Ohio, and a forensic accountant from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit coordinating on the case. I transmitted the evidence package via encrypted channel. The case agent confirmed that 2 of Fen Carey's prior victims had already filed complaints, and that there was an open investigation which had stalled, because they couldn't locate the subject under his current alias. They had him now. I contacted Cora at 6:15 and told her to come to the house alone before he woke up. No phone, take the bus. She arrived at 7:40, looking like she hadn't slept since October. She sat at the kitchen table in her coat, and I made coffee, and I did not let her apologize for anything before I placed the printed evidence file in front of her. She went through it page by page. When she reached the signature analysis, a comparison between the forged signature on the LLC incorporation documents and samples of her genuine signature from filings with the Ohio Board of Nursing, she pressed her fingers against her eyes. He asked me to sign something about 6 months ago, she said quietly. He said it was paperwork for his investment group. that I was listed as a business reference. She paused. I didn't read it. I trusted him. He counted on that, I said. That is the entire method. She looked up at me. How do you know all of this? I told her. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. 28 years, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, financial crimes, Medicare fraud networks, money laundering architecture. The room behind the basement shelving unit she had always assumed held the snowblower. She sat very still for a long moment. You kept this from me my entire life, she said. I protected you, I said. There's a difference, and I am using it right now to protect you again. She was quiet for a while. Then, okay, what do we do? The plan was clean. I would attend the meeting he'd scheduled for 10 o'clock at a downtown office suite. I would present as a frightened, cooperative older man, eager to sign whatever would keep his daughter out of trouble. Federal agents in plain clothes would be in the building. The extortion call I'd recorded, combined with the OIG fraud evidence Sutton's team had assembled, gave them everything they needed. I dressed carefully. Old khaki trousers, a cardigan with a small coffee stain on the cuff, scuffed New Balance shoes. I found my reading glasses with the bent frame and put them on instead of my regular pair. I practiced my walk in the hallway, slightly slower than natural, right hand favoring the banister. I drove the Buick downtown and parked 2 blocks from the building. The office was exactly what I expected from someone staging an encounter, designed to make a frightened civilian feel outmatched before the paperwork appears. Glass lobby, chrome fixtures, the quiet authority of a place where serious things happen to people who don't understand them. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor and pushed open the door to suite 412. Rowan was already there. Charcoal blazer, collared shirt, the same calibrated handshake as Christmas Eve. A man at the conference table was introduced as the attorney, though the state bar certificate on the wall behind him had an inconsistency in the admission year that told me what I needed to know about his actual standing. I sat down slowly, took my time settling in, looked at the quitclaim deed on the table with the careful, bewildered expression of a man encountering a document he's been dreading. I reached into my cardigan pocket for my pen. I've carried that pen for over 20 years. Black ballpoint, nothing remarkable on the outside. What Rowan couldn't know was that 2 nights earlier I had replaced the standard ink cartridge with a water-soluble erasable gel, the kind used in disappearing ink products, reformulated in a gel base that flows normally, dries normally, and reads normally under standard lighting. It becomes entirely invisible after 18 to 24 hours at room temperature. No heat required, just time. I signed my name on the signature line, slowly, with visible effort. I let my hand carry just enough tremor. The attorney stamped the document and dated it. Rowan picked it up and slid it carefully into a leather portfolio. He looked at me across the table with an expression of benevolent condescension. The look of a man who has just taken something valuable from someone who didn't fully understand what was happening. You're doing the right thing, he said, for her. She's all I have, I said. The door behind him opened. 2 people in dark coats entered with credentials already extended. Behind them came Sutton Greer, who I hadn't seen in a suit since a grand jury proceeding in 2017, and who still looks like the kind of man that courtrooms pay attention to. The woman identified herself as a special agent with the HHS Office of Inspector General. She addressed Rowan by his real name, Fen Carey, and informed him that he was being placed under arrest on federal charges, including healthcare fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and extortion. He turned and looked at me. I had already straightened in my chair. The hunched posture was gone. The reading glasses were in my cardigan pocket. I looked back at him the way I looked at people across federal interview tables for 28 years, steady, unhurried, giving nothing away. You ran a background check, he said. Not a question. I ran several, I said. He glanced at the leather portfolio. The signature. Will be completely blank by tomorrow morning, I said. Water-soluble erasable gel. The document is legally worthless, and forensically it establishes your intent to commit real estate fraud, which adds a layer to everything else you're already facing. He set the portfolio on the table. The mail agent stepped to his side and began reading him his rights. The false attorney was already on his phone in the corner. Calling his own counsel, presumably, because recognizing when to make that call was the only professionally sound decision he'd made all morning. Sutton caught my eye from across the room. Small nod. I drove home. Cora was sitting on the front steps in her coat despite the cold, both hands wrapped around a mug. She stood when the Buick turned into the driveway. I parked and walked up the path, and she read my face the way she reads patients in the ICU, scanning for the thing that matters most. "Done?" she asked. "Done." She let out a long breath and sat back down on the steps, and I sat beside her, and we stayed there for a while in the quiet, which is one of the things we have always been good at together. "The other women," she said eventually. "The ones before me. The OIG case agent is already in contact with them. The Columbus situation looks promising for license reinstatement. The Florida case is more complicated, but it's being reopened." She nodded slowly, stared at the dormant flower bed along the front walk. "I keep thinking about how long I might have stayed, how much longer I might have believed him." She turned to look at me. "How do you know when to trust your instincts, when you've been wrong about someone that badly?" I thought about that for a moment. About the number of hours I'd spent across tables from people who appeared completely reasonable and were doing genuinely terrible things to other people. About the ways a practiced liar studies the instincts of decent people specifically so he can get ahead of them. "You were a 9-year-old girl who watched her mother die and had to keep going anyway," I said. "You grew up methodical, careful. You double-check everything because you learned young that the cost of missing something is real. That is not a flaw. That is the best version of pattern recognition." He didn't defeat bad instincts. He spent months specifically engineering circumstances to defeat good ones. There's a difference. She was quiet. "Will you tell me more," she said, "about the work?" I looked at the oak tree in the front yard, bare in December, the gray Ohio sky behind it. "Come inside," I said. "I'll make more coffee, and I'll show you what's behind the shelving unit." 2 months later, Fen Carey entered a guilty plea on 4 federal counts. His prior history, introduced through the Florida civil record and the 2 prior victim complaints, informed the sentencing guidelines substantially. The attorney who'd facilitated the fraudulent closing was disbarred and separately indicted. The LLC registered under Cora's credentials was dissolved. The fraudulent Medicare claims were formally voided in the CMS system. The Ohio Board of Nursing issued her a letter of clearance, stating that no disciplinary action had been or would be taken against her license. She framed it. It hangs in her kitchen between her nursing school graduation photo and a drawing her niece made of a horse. The physician's assistant from Louisville is still in the process of appeal, but Sutton tells me the OIG testimony has been strong. The pharmacist from Columbus got her license reinstated in the spring. I still live in the same ranch house. Same Buick in the driveway, same squirrels at the oak tree, same too much coffee every morning before 7. But the basement room has a second chair in it now, and twice a week Cora drives over after her shift and sits in it. I've been teaching her the financial architecture, how shell companies obscure beneficial ownership, how fraudulent Medicare billing cycles work, how to read a CMS claims report for the specific anomalies that indicate phantom billing. She picks it up faster than most of the analysts I trained over the years. Faster, honestly, than I expected, though I probably shouldn't have been surprised. She has always been careful with details. I taught her that too. Last month we took on our first case together. An elderly man in Kettering whose home health aide had used his Medicare number to bill for nursing visits that never occurred. $19,000 over 8 months. Cora found the discrepancy in 40 minutes, cross-referencing the billing dates against the man's actual hospital admission records. She set the report on the desk and tapped the relevant line with one finger. "There," she said. I looked at it. "There," I agreed. And at dinner that evening, she set her fork on the right side of her plate, exactly where it belongs, and left it there.